2021, and this is the meeting of the Vermont Clean Water Board. It is I think, the official kickoff of budget development for the FY23 clean water budget. And we have an agenda today that includes approving the minutes of the last meeting from August 2012, reviewing the clean water budget process with Emily Bird, and the Clean Water Fund operating statement with Emily Byrne. We'll review a draft of the staff recommendations for the clean water budget and review the public comment online questionnaire that I believe will be going out for a period of time to gather comment, but we'll also have public comment from individuals who are attendants at the meeting. And I know I'm echoing now. And then we will discuss the proposed draft, the draft budget, and discuss whether and vote on whether we're ready to post it for public comment. And then I will just give you an update on the program audit Clean Water Fund. So are there any clarifications, additions, deletions, or comments on the agenda for today? Okay, hearing none, then I think we can get started with item number one. We have the minutes of August 12, 2021 as an action item, and they are in the packet. If there is a motion to approve those, we'll certainly entertain it.
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay. Are there any discussion on the August 12, 2021 minutes as they appear in the package? I don't see any hands raised by board members or efforts to speak, but if I'm missing something, Emily, you can jump in and let me know. Okay. Why don't we then just move to vote on the motion to adopt the minutes? All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Okay, anyone opposed? Anyone abstaining? Joe, that wasn't a, Joe, that's your yellow coffee mug. I thought it was a yellow hand going up. Anyway, okay, thank you. We've approved the minutes of August 12, 2021, and I'll now return to agenda item 2 and turn this over to Emily Bird, who'll walk us through our process for the next few months.
Excellent. Thank you, Secretary Young. Can you hear me okay now?
I can hear you.
Excellent. So welcome, everyone. Thank you for being here today. This Clean Water Board meeting really kicks off our State Fiscal Year 2023 Clean Water Budget process. So I just wanted to orient you where we are in that process and what steps are ahead. So back in July, the Emergency Board met to adopt State Fiscal Year 23 consensus revenue forecast. That is the basis of our Clean Water Fund budget targets for this budget that Emily Byrne will be getting into in a little more detail next. And today we are here at the Clean Water Board meeting to review, where the board will review and approve the draft State Fiscal Year 2023 Clean Water budget for public comment. And once the board approves a budget for public comment, we will be working to get all of those materials posted and announcements out to notify the public of this opportunity to comment. And then we will hold the public comment period for 30 days, spanning from October 19th to November 19th. And then there's a November 4th hearing, public hearing, where agency staff will present in greater detail each of the clean water budget line items to the public attendees, and there will be substantial time to hear verbal public comment from attendees. And then over the course of that 30-day process, we will have an online questionnaire available where folks can log on and weigh in on the clean water budget priorities and how to rank the different funding items. And if anybody needs a hard copy of that online questionnaire to complete it, please let us know and we will be sure to support that. And then after the public comment period closes November 19th at 4 p.m., We will be reviewing all of the public comment that has come in and summarizing it for the Clean Water Board to review in late November into early December. And then the board will reconvene again December 14th to review public comment, make any adjustments that they need to based on public comment, and make their final budget recommendation to the governor and the administration. And then the board's budget recommendation gets incorporated into the agency's budget targets for the upcoming budget process, and then incorporated into the governor's proposed budget that is presented to the legislature in January of 2022. And then the board will reconvene in February as needed to check in on revenue and if there were any adjustments that were made to the budget since their final recommendation. And then the budget goes through the legislative review process over the course of the legislative session with some testimony accepted on that. So that's sort of a high-level overview of the process ahead for us. Please check in on the Clean Water Board webpage to learn more. After today's board meeting, we will be getting all of the State Fiscal Year 23 budget materials posted. And then please subscribe if you're interested to our e-newsletter to be notified of opportunities to participate in the public process. And Secretary Moore, I see your hand is raised. Sorry if I missed that before.
Oh, no, I just raised it. Just wanted to confirm whether you would like board members to make a point to attend the hearing on the 4th. Is it a warned, I assume it's a warned meeting because it's a public hearing, or if you'd prefer we wait and just receive the summary of public comment closer to the end of the month?
It would be wonderful to have a quorum available for the public hearing. And Melissa was kind enough to help schedule so that the time slot for the hearing works well for board attendees. So that would be wonderful if board members are able to be there and to hear the public comment as well. And I believe it technically qualifies as a public meeting of the board. Thanks for bringing that up, Secretary Moore.
Okay, does anyone have any questions for Emily? Great, so as I understand it, the calendar reflected on the process document on the screen has been sent to all of the board members, and so including the November 4 public hearing, and it would be great if we could have a quorum available, or the full board, even better, to listen in on the public comment. Otherwise, it will be conveyed up to the board members as we are familiar with the process, and it will be in great detail, which is good. So,
excellent. And Secretary Young, may I just add one more piece, that we will be sending out a press release as well as announcements via our newsletters and social media, and working across the interagency team to get the word out across our different networks about this public comment period. So hoping to reach a broad audience, and if anyone has any insights on how to get the word out, please feel free to reach out to me. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Emily. There's nothing else on item 2. We'll move along to item 3. Emily Byrne, the Director of Finance and Administration at ANR, will do a review of the Clean Water Fund operating statement and the revenue projections for FY23.
Great. Good morning. Thank you. I'm going to share my screen. We made one small update to the operating statement that's in the packet that we'll send along as an update, just to include the expenditure proposals that will be presented by Emily after I walk through the operating statement. At a high level, not much has changed from nothing has really changed from our conversation last month. If you'll recall, in FY 2021, we had a $3.7 million surplus of unreserved, unallocated appropriations at the end of the year as a result of the revenues coming in significantly higher than projected. For FY 2022, there was also a revenue upgrade. And in June of last year, you'll recall that the board decided to allocate $1.4 million of the unallocated balance from FY 2021 to the Agency of Agriculture to help with some grants that were coming in higher than anticipated. Even after allocating the $1.4 million to the Agency of Ag at the end of last year, fiscal year, there are still $4.3 million of unallocated, unreserved projected at the end of FY 2022. The FY 2023 budget that will be presented contemplates fully utilizing that $4.3 million of unallocated funds. So with the revenue that was projected, or the revenue that was adopted by the emergency board in July of 21, anticipated 21.5, I'll round up a little bit, $1 million to come to the Clean Water Fund. With the additional 4.3, we'll fully expend what's anticipated as revenue out of the Clean Water Fund. The appropriations that we presented in more detail are listed in the in the orange column under the individual departments. The agriculture money goes to its own special fund, so that's seen below as a sort of a transfer to agriculture, and the transfer to the Lakes and Crisis Fund. And there, at the end of all of this, there is still projected to be $500,000 set aside as a contingency reserve in case the revenue projections don't perform during FY 2023. And that's all I have. If there are any questions on the operating statement. Great.
Thank you, Emily. So what you have on the screen was updated, and you're going to send it out to the board members. Okay. No questions, comments? Was everybody able to see that on the screen? Okay. All right. Well, hearing none, we can move along to the review of the draft clean water budget recommendations. Secretary Moore?
Yes. Good morning, everyone. So there is a rather lengthy and detailed narrative that the Clean Water Program put together that describes our budget development process this year. It is a significant shift from prior years in that we're now working under the framing that's provided by Act 76 that was passed back in 2019. And so I encourage both board members who may not have had sufficient time to review it, but also members of the public to please work your way through this narrative. It starts on page 6 of the meeting materials. I think the sort of the highlights, and then we'll get into some of the details around the budget, and we'll be pleased to have Emily Bird jump in and help answer questions. But we started with reviewing the FY22 budget, the line items in the budget, sort of the approach and framing we've used for several years now, and trying to determine and match those existing line items with the newly identified priorities established in Act 76. There are 3 tiers that Act 76 identifies: high, medium, and low priorities. And so we worked to sort of figure out where each of the existing initiatives fit, if it had a good home, and if there were gaps, if there were things that Act 76 identified as priorities that didn't have a good place within our existing budget structure. Once we sort of mapped where each of the initiatives would live, then the next piece of work was to develop some budgeting targets, and this should be a point of discussion today. Tier 1 is the highest priority, and you'll see that we've allocated about 60% of the overall budget to Tier 1 initiatives. Tier 2 are those middle priority items, and we've allocated 30% of the budget. And Tier 3 are the lower priority items, and they receive 10% of the budget. This is in no way set in stone, but rather a reflection of what we felt was legislative intent, as well as the technical staff's best judgment. The other piece I would flag in this space is that traditionally the Clean Water Fund has provided longstanding grants to municipalities with stormwater utilities. That was one of these pieces that simply didn't have a home under this new construct. And so we are proposing to essentially wind down that support over time, allowing, I believe, and Emily can correct me if I'm wrong, but 5 years of funding for each community that establishes a stormwater utility, which would mean St. Albans City would still receive 2 or 3 years of further funding, given that they've only been in place for a short period of time. But with the FY23 budget, we would be wrapping down that financial support to Williston, Burlington, Colchester, and I don't remember what the last community, South Burlington, Burlington, Colchester, and Williston. So just flagging that for consideration. What follows then in this packet, and it's not my intention to talk about each one of these things, is just a summary of the funding that's being proposed, the sort of the flavor of the money, so to speak. We do have 3 different types of money available for clean water work again this year, similar to the amended FY22 budget, in that there's a line of funding from the Clean Water Fund itself, which is the operating statement Emily Byrne just reviewed. We have capital funds that are in the mix and have assumed that $11 million in capital bill monies will be available for clean water work in the coming year. And then we also have an additional $10 million of America Rescue Plan, or ARPA funds, that are available for clean water work. As you may recall, the legislature, as part of the FY22 budget, committed $10 million a year for 3 years, for each of the next 3 years, I should say, of ARPA funds for clean water. So we will have that $10 million in ARPA funding again in the FY24 budget. In total, we have more than $46 million this year to invest in clean water. This is before we are drawing down some of those companion federal funds, meaning that the total investment of direct state dollars or state dollars leverage, or federal dollars leveraged with these state investments, is likely to exceed $60 million this year. So this is a really exciting acceleration of this work. And maybe I'll pause there. And I think, having folks maybe start by board members with a discussion of this 60-30-10 split. And if you have questions about that in regards to tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3 priorities, if you have questions organizationally about decisions that were made to sort of place certain activities in one of those different tiers, and then if you have questions about either things that are being wound down, like the stormwater utility grants, or new work around clean water enhancement grants in particular, we're happy to answer those as well.
Bob Flint has his hand raised.
There we go. Hi, folks. So I think, as Secretary Moore just alluded to, this is a remarkable opportunity to sort of accelerate progress on a number of fronts. So I get that. So my question is really petty and picky, but in the tier 1 and the multi-sector innovative piece being zeroed out, and I get in the narrative that there's funds left over in the phosphorus challenge, but I would think that, given that there's opportunities with funding that there have not been in the past, you might want to double down on that. And maybe there are other things that one might want to incentivize in a Vermont kind of way to improve water quality and come up with some distinctive innovations and best practices. So I guess I would ask for rethinking that and putting some money from this into that, in addition to what already is still on the table for the phosphorus challenge. Thanks.
Maybe can I follow up on Bob's question with a question of my own of sorts? Emily, do we traditionally, when we send this information out for public comment, I know like in the US Treasury guidance around the ARPA monies, they actually pose a set of questions that they are interested in specifically receiving feedback on. I don't know if that's been our practice, but it seems like the question Bob has raised around innovative practices might be one that would be ripe for that sort of question, and see what sort of responses we receive from the public in that space.
That's an excellent point. And later on the agenda, I'll share an overview of the draft online questionnaire and welcome input, and we could incorporate a question specifically related to that. And Secretary Moore, would it be helpful to also share some of the other funding sources that are kind of leading to some scoping that these dollars may be budgeted for in the future to support implementation of innovative practices. There's through the Lake Champlain Basin Program and other funders. So that was part of, I think, the rationale this year is we know that there's a study related to Missisquoi Bay, as well as some other innovative treatment approaches for sort of natural resource restoration efforts, and that some of those phasing efforts or scoping efforts could be phased into implementation, and then this would likely be an excellent funding source to help support the implementation of those activities.
Yeah, Emily, I think that that's an important point, and apologize that I didn't cover that in any detail in my overview, which is also by virtue of some of these increases in federal funding streams, we are anticipating a potentially significant increase, assuming there's ultimately a federal budget in funding for the Lake Champlain Basin program. And so, yes, very much that influenced the thinking and the way we laid this out, and frankly, trying to balance all of those competing demands. And that Lake Champlain Basin program funding. Hopefully we'll have more detail on that before the board needs to take final action in December. I understand that at least as it currently looks, the federal government would need to take action on their FY22 budget by the end of September, or excuse me, by the beginning of December. So that we'll hopefully be able to come back with additional detail in that space as well.
Jim Giffen has his hand raised.
Hi, good morning. I'm just wondering, when you all met as your staff, and it seems like we're shifting funding around as was planned, did you discuss, the organizations that are going to receive substantially more money and their ability to gear up and use those funds effectively?
Emily, do you want to talk about that? I know there's been a significant Act 76 working group engaged in this work throughout.
Absolutely. So Act 76, the Clean Water Service Delivery Act of 2019, establishes 4 new funding programs that we're transitioning or sort of crosswalking over to from State Fiscal Year 22's budget to this budget. And you'll see that there's $7 million budgeted for the water quality restoration formula grants that are targeted to clean water service providers and their partner networks to implement projects based on phosphorus reduction in the Lake Champlain Basin and the Lake Memphremagog Basin. In addition to that, those entities will be administering over $200,000 to support operation and maintenance and verification of existing clean water projects. So that's a significant increase in funding to clean water project design and implementation. And in addition to that, we also have $5 million that are going to be contributing toward the water quality enhancement grant program, split between continuation of statewide. I'm sorry, I'm getting a little bit of feedback. I just wanted to double check on the audio if it sounds okay for all of you. Okay, excellent. Sorry about that. And there is the establishment of a new water quality enhancement grant program that we propose $3 million contributing to statewide continuing funding for statewide non-regulatory clean water projects, plus $2 million that will contribute to protection and enhancement goals through conservation, with the Vermont Housing and Conservation Board continuing to oversee that program. So when you put all of the funding together for project implementation, it is a substantial increase in funding compared to current levels. And we have had conversations through our Act 76 advisory group about capacity, and have also provided startup grants that are in the process of getting into place with the clean water service providers so that they can begin developing their organizational capacity to serve in this role. And funding those organizations time to provide us with input as we develop our policies around that. And in addition to that, our State Fiscal Year 22 budget has about $300,000 that we're going to be seeking partner input to invest in organizational capacity development, trying to make strategic investments that will help to address bottlenecks in our system, as well as capacity constraints of organizations to do this work and get these funds out on the ground. And we hope and plan to continue that level of support moving into the next year as well. And so a lot of those program and partner support activities are also built into line item 1.62 in this budget, the program and partner support line item with the Clean Water Initiative program. So I hope that helps to address some of the questions about capacity building. And in addition to the partner network operating in the non-regulatory space, you'll see in Tier 2, there's a substantial investment planned in the stormwater regulatory space as well, supporting municipalities across the ARPA funds, capital bill, and the Clean Water Fund to meet the stormwater regulatory requirements that they face through the Municipal Road General Permit, the 3-acre permit, and the Municipal Separate Storm Sewer System, or MS4 permit program. Is there anything else you'd like me to highlight, Secretary Moore?
Not absent questions from others. I think that was a really wonderful overview. Thank you.
Thank you.
I guess I would ask Secretary Moore, were you finished with the presentation when you paused, or did you have more you wanted to cover?
No, not absent questions. I just, there's so much deep information that summarizes each of the line items. I'm not sure I would do it any real justice in trying to walk through it, but am interested, as I said, in feedback from the board about this 60-30-10 allocation. If there are questions about organizationally decisions that were made in terms of which items fall into which tier of priority, and then any questions or concerns about sort of the new components, whether it's the addition of the water quality enhancement grants or the winding down of the stormwater utility payments.
So why don't we open it up to any additional questions or comments from the board members? I'm going to, I think, just take the liberty of just highlighting the fact that this year there's not only changes brought about by Act 76, but also the influx of federal dollars. And as you can see on the proposed budget, $10 million of ARPA funds are reflected as part of our allocation process. And there is an asterisk there, and I just wanted to point that out to folks that the U.S. Treasury guidance is not all in yet in terms of the permissible uses of those funds. And so we wanted to just asterisk that. We expect those in November and have greater clarity on whether, you know, the allocations and the projects reflected in those allocations will continue to be eligible uses under the preliminary guidance. I believe we were comfortable that they were. And then secondly, as the executive branch allocates the, you know, over $500 million that the legislature appropriated of ARPA funds across various programs, we are working to make sure we're prioritizing those, using those funds to achieve the most transformational projects across the state government. And that is, again, a conversation in progress as we develop the broader state budget. So I expect that, you know, we'll have an update on that come November, but definitely December before we finalize this budget. But I just wanted to flag for folks that this may not be as static as it has been in the past due to the circumstances of the federal funds and the status of the governance. I mean the U.S. Treasury guidance and the work that's going on ARPA funds in general. Happy to answer any questions on that. Live in interesting times for sure. Okay, so Emily, were you going to move to the, Julie, did you finish your sub B for the leveraging federal infrastructure funds and state match?
Well, just one piece that I think is worth flagging in that space is as I'm sure most know, Congress continues to debate what the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, the IIJA. There are a number of components on that would touch on Vermont, but probably most germane to the work of this board would be supplemental funding to the state revolving fund. As you may know, the state revolving fund is what we use to help provide low cost or no cost loans to municipalities making improvements to their wastewater and drinking water systems. The funds are also often available for stormwater projects, some amount of natural resources restoration work, as well as agricultural BMPs. We believe there could be a significant infusion of funds into the SRF program were this federal infrastructure bill to pass. And those dollars would likely be available to be distributed as a 50% grant, 50% loan is what we've been told to anticipate. In order to access those additional dollars, the state does need to come up with match. Generally, our match for the state revolving fund is we put in $1 for every $4 of federal money we're able to pull down. So it's an 80-20 split. The Infrastructure Act is currently drafted, would have a 90-10 split. So we would put in $1 of funding for every $9 we pulled down. But you can see there's a small footnote on the side of the page. Now I've lost the page number off the top. Well, supporting material number 5 that indicates if the Infrastructure Act is passed, the agency would need about $1 million of additional funding to be able to pull down that allotment of federal funds. In addition, we are anticipating increased in activity around wastewater projects, which we refer to as municipal pollution control projects sometimes, confusingly, in part because there are other ARPA dollars besides those being administered by the Clean Water Board that are helping promote projects in this space related to sewer overflow elimination, municipal or village water and sewer systems, et cetera. And just an increase in demand in this space. And the state provides an up to a certain amount of grant funding to help offset the costs of some of these significant infrastructure investments in municipalities. And if there's full uptake of the dollars that are available, both through the Clean Water Fund as well as these other funding sources, we would need approximately $6.5 million worth of additional funding beyond that, which is budgeted for in our clean water budget to make all of those municipal commitments whole. Obviously, that's a significant sum, and there's a lot of moving pieces. I'm not sure there's action required by the board right now, but we just wanted to flag that there are both these additional opportunities that may become available for further investment in clean water, but they come with also some demands on state resources to provide match.
Okay, any other questions from board members for Secretary Moore or Emily, one of the two Emilys?
Secretary Young, there is a question in the chat from a public attendee. I don't know if you'd like to entertain those at this point in time or later on.
Why don't we entertain those during the public comment period? And that's coming right up. I would like to move on to the agenda if possible, to review the online questionnaire, and then we'll open it up to public comment.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, so the materials that we shared for today's meeting include the draft content of an online questionnaire. We've started to put it into the actual online format, but it reads a little bit better in a Word document for now as we solicit your input on this online questionnaire. So I'm going to provide a high-level overview for you all, and then welcome the board's feedback if there's specific areas you'd like us to further highlight or specific areas you'd like to target input from the public. So each year we try to structure this online questionnaire as an educational tool, providing some background and introductory information before we get into the meat of what we're looking for input on. So we have an introduction section here that lays out the clean water budget process overall, the role of the Clean Water Board, and And this nice infographic, I just want to give a shout out to Gianna Petito for putting this together. It highlights the 3 different funding sources that flow into the clean water budget process from the Clean Water Fund, capital bill dollars, and this year American Rescue Plan Act. And then each year the Clean Water Board deliberates on the draft budget recommendation before it gets posted for public comment, and then public commenters can weigh in on those priorities. And then funds get allocated to state agencies to address water quality challenges across all of our different land use sectors, from stormwater and roads to agriculture, natural resource restoration, and wastewater. So we provide some of that background information here, as well as an overview of the different types of land use sectors that clean water projects help to address, and the multiple benefits that these projects provide beyond just improving water quality. So providing some of that background information, and then an overview of the different funding sources as well that get leveraged into the clean water space in our state. So highlighting the fact that the Clean Water Fund and the capital bill dollars and now ARPA are just a small, not a small, but approximately less than half of the total funding that's leveraged to support this work statewide. And this graphic was pulled from our annual performance report to provide some of that context. And then we give an overview of this year's budget targets for State Fiscal Year 2023, the $25.9 million target for Clean Water Fund, plus the estimated $11 million from the capital bill, and the $10 million additional in federal ARPA funds, for a total of $46.9 million this year. And then we summarize the clean water budget appropriations over time here to provide some context about how this investment has grown and the different role of the different funding sources, showing Clean Water Fund in blue, capital bill in yellow, which was incorporated into this budget process effective in State Fiscal Year 2019. And now we have ARPA shown in orange, starting in State Fiscal Year 2022 and running through State Fiscal Year 2024, which is not shown yet in this graph. So providing some context on the total extent of funds included in the clean water budget. And then we tried to really focus this year's questionnaire. We have a bit of a changing landscape with the design of our budget. So we looked at the statutory charge of the Clean Water Board and tried to focus public comment in the areas where the decision making is really happening. And one of the charges of the Clean Water Board is to review revenue and determine whether or not there is sufficient revenue to fund the work under the water quality restoration formula grants, the enhancement grants, the developed land implementation grants for 3-acre financing, and the municipal stormwater implementation grants. And if there's a finding that there is insufficient revenue, to make a recommendation for what additional revenue needs to be raised. So one of the questions in this questionnaire addresses whether the public feels that there is sufficient funding to address those priorities, and if not, for them to provide some input on how much additional funding would be necessary to meet the needs. So that's that first category of questions in the online questionnaire. The next section of the questionnaire focuses on tiering. So this is our first year budgeting with those 3 priority tiers that were established through Act 76 that effectively updated the statutory prioritization scheme of the Clean Water Fund, where we have line items under Tier 1 identified in statute as being the top priority, but equal priority within that tier. So that includes the formula grants, the operation and maintenance of existing clean water projects, basin planning support funds, water quality enhancement grants, Agency of Agriculture's water quality grants to partners and farmers, and agency and partner operating support that is critical to being able to maintain these programs and to administer these funds. So the budget has 54% of its funds overall, factoring in all funding sources across Clean Water Fund, Capital Bill, and ARPA, going into Tier 1. And we summarize that here in this figure. Tier 2 includes the work happening in the forestry sector related to acceptable management practices and municipal stormwater implementation, and Vermont Housing Conservation Board's water quality farm improvement and retirement projects, as well as the innovation line item. So about 29% of the budget goes into Tier 2, and then Tier 3 and other includes the Developed Land Implementation Grant Program, and then other line items that aren't explicitly addressed in the statutory priorities of the Clean Water Fund. So that includes the Stormwater Utility Incentive Payments, Lake and Crisis Fund, and Better Connections and Downtown Transportation Fund. And so this question we're really asking, do you, the public, agree with how we've prioritized percentage-wise funding across these 3 tiers? And if you have a different recommended breakdown for prioritizing funds across those 3 tiers at a high level, what would that look like? So right now it's approximately 54, 29, 17%, but if there's a different breakdown that the public is interested in seeing, to provide that level of feedback, and then the board would be able to consider that feedback in making adjustments across those 3 priority tiers later in the budget process. And then finally, this last section summarizes within each tier, Tier 1, 2, and 3, the different line items that are budgeted into there percentage-wise, how much of the funding in each of those tiers is going into those line items, and asks the public to review our ranking based on percentages. So line items with the highest percentage of funds are ranked at the top as a default, and if folks would prefer a different prioritization percentage-wise of funds within each of those tiers, for them to provide feedback here. So for example, 42% of Tier 1 funding is going into Agency of Agriculture's water quality grants to farmers and partners. So that's listed first in this ranking, and then the online questionnaire will allow them to drag and rank things if they would propose a different ranking of these line items within each of the tiers. So we go through this for each of the Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3, and other priorities with an opportunity to re-rank if they propose a different breakdown. And then finally, there's a section with other comments and closeout. So we wanted to ask, there's a lot of changes afoot this year, and a real interest in organizational capacity and making sure that we are addressing any unmet needs in this whole clean water system. So the first question here asks if they believe that there are any unmet needs in supporting clean water priorities based on the proposed budget, and being able to provide a short answer if they have any comments related to that. And then we open it up for open-ended comments in general on the clean water budget. And of course, we'd like to get some feedback on our questionnaire to see how we can do better in future years, or if there's any adjustments we can make. So we have a question here to ask for feedback on this questionnaire so we can factor that in future years. And then finally, how did they hear about this questionnaire, so we can have an understanding of how folks are learning about these opportunities to better structure our communications in the future. And each year we also collect some demographic information related to zip code and target audience, so we can include that in the interpretation of the data, understanding which types of audiences we're reaching, and also to inform future communications on how we can do better reaching any gaps in our target audience. So that concludes a lot of information. Apologies for breezing through it, but I'm happy to go back if there's any questions or suggestions on how to update this questionnaire for targeting where you would like to see input. And Bob, we will work on incorporating a question specifically related to innovation, and perhaps that would fit well under the section with regards to unmet needs and asking for input with regards to innovation. So I'll pause there if there's any feedback or questions. Hi, Bob.
Hi there. So just a couple comments. You have a typo on your Tier 2 graphic. You're missing a P in municipal, but
thank you.
For each of the sections, so like, let's stay on that page for a sec. So I presume graphically before this goes live, there'll be something between the graph and the pull down selection piece explaining what that is. I know it does in the first one, but you shouldn't assume people read it sequentially. And I guess maybe our general comment is, and this is very thorough, but is this too jargony? And how can we make it more accessible to somebody who's not a clean water fan or already invested in the process to get genuine layperson input? Maybe that's not possible, but if I wasn't on this board, I'm not sure I would know necessarily what all these things are.
It's an excellent point, and a continued challenge for us to figure out the right balance of communicating technical information in an understandable format. So we can definitely go back to the drawing board and work on adjusting terminology to try to strike that balance a little bit better. And thank you for the flag about the typo and repeating the question for each of these tiers. We'll definitely, as we translate this content into the online format, run through a couple of test rounds to make sure that it flows smoothly and that information is sprinkled throughout where it will be helpful. So excellent feedback. Thank you so much.
Thank you for the plain English comment, Bob. Jim?
Yeah, I guess my question is sort of a combination budget survey question. So I know we've developed metrics in terms of, our different projects as to phosphorus reduced, pollution reduced, but are we spending enough money on real live monitoring as to what's coming down the river? And if we help one farm and two go south, we're actually losing ground. So I'm just wondering the metric in terms of what's actually happening. Are we putting enough money in there?
Secretary Moore, did you want to respond to that, or would?
Yeah, I can start and maybe then Emily let you augment. I think there's two components to a larger monitoring strategy. One is the long-term monitoring program that's administered by the Lake Champlain Basin Program. And that really is very much as you stated, Jim, looking at what's coming down the river. So they're monitoring long-term monitoring stations that are maintained by USGS at the mouths of the major tributaries to Lake Champlain. The agency has staff that goes out twice a week during from April to October, collecting grab samples at fixed points in the lake. And all of this gives us a pretty comprehensive picture of water quality conditions at that really large scale. We also have a lot of granularity around monitoring studies that have been done of individual practices. Obviously, those are extremely finite in number because they are expensive and often challenging to install. But we do have benefit of that data. And then in the middle is sort of the challenging space. We have a tactical basin planning process that gets at some of that work, that pulls together periodic and more detailed monitoring regimes, some practice specific and some looking at smaller sub-watersheds to detect changes in water quality over time. And it's sort of the picture that gets painted by looking at all of that information in totality that helps inform these decisions. I think it's a great question you have asked there, and one to which I don't think that there's a singular right answer. More monitoring certainly provides more information and more robust feedback on our work, and at the same time it comes at the expense, both financial and the technical capacity expense of resources that could otherwise be invested in implementation. So we are constantly, I would say, striving to ensure that we have enough information to make sure the investments, the clean water investments are in the most impactful and important projects, and to adapt and change process over time. And I'm sure there are gaps in places we would love to collect additional information. And at the same time, it really is this balancing act. And so if there are specific suggestions you have or questions, places where you think we may not have the kind of information we need, would love to hear them and have that be part of the dialogue as we kind of program out our monitoring resources and think long and hard each year about whether additional dollars would be best spent in this space. Emily, I don't know if you want to add any more detail around the sort of intersection between tactical basin planning and the work of the Clean Water Fund.
Oh, that was a great overview. Thank you, Secretary Moore. I will just highlight that we do intend to continue supporting the La Rosa water quality monitoring program laboratory analytics in the State Fiscal Year 2023 Clean Water budget as well. So that's baked into the program and partner support line item and will be reflected in our spending plan. And as Secretary Moore mentioned, we do turn to tactical basin planning, both to inform monitoring needs and gaps, but also to drive project prioritization and where to target these dollars. And that will be even more present in the allocation of funds through the water quality restoration formula grants this year, that starting in State Fiscal Year 23, I should say, that will be prioritized specifically based on cost effectiveness related to phosphorus reduction. And so we're working on better aligning the budget allocation and the funding related to those outputs and outcomes we're trying to achieve.
Are there any other questions or feedback from board members? Emily, I have a question. I know in the past, and it's not in this particular package, which is fine, but we have strived to describe every line item in the budget and what programs it supports and what the goals are around those projects. Is that something that is still relevant to this changing world? And if so, do you share that with the public along with the questionnaire to, I think Jim's or Bob's point, that, you know, I think that is sort of a plain English overview of all of the programs funded by this money.
Sure. So we do have a narrative overview document of the draft State Fiscal Year 2023 Clean Water budget, and it starts out with sort of some of the structural shifts that we're making as a result of Act 76, and then it goes through each of those budget line items and describes how they relate to the Clean Water Fund statutory priorities and provides definitions of what each of those programs are aiming to accomplish. And so what we're going to plan to do is put together a budget package that has the one-pager of the draft State Fiscal Year 23 budget attached to those line item descriptions, and put that out and link to that throughout this online questionnaire so that folks, as they are going through and responding to this questionnaire, have that for reference to be able to learn more. But I also understand the extent of technical details and many changes happening this year. So maybe we'll go back and review all of those materials with an eye for avoiding the technical jargon and trying to make it as accessible as possible before we release this on October 19th. Does that answer your question?
It does. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else before we move to public comment? Emily, if not, Emily, why don't we maybe start with the questions in the chat? There's one question from John, who's a guest, suggesting we are underfunding the Lakes in Crisis Fund at $50,000. I think that's a question every year because of the way the budget operates, I believe, but would you want to answer that?
Sure. Yes, this question comes up often. So the Lakes in Crisis Fund was established to respond to the initial response for implementing the Lake in Crisis Response Plan that was established for Lake Carmi. In addition to this funding, which is used to make sort of strategic investments in project planning and monitoring activities, we also have been providing other funding to Lake Carmi, and that's described in the Lake Carmi performance report. And we're also going to be updating that performance report as part of this year's Clean Water Initiative performance report with a section highlighting progress in the Lake Carmi watershed. But I wanted to highlight that Lake Carmi is part of the Missisquoi Bay watershed that is going to be operating under the Water Quality Restoration Formula grants in State Fiscal Year 2023. So projects that are implemented to address phosphorus pollution in the Lake Carmi watershed are going to be eligible for funding under those formula grants, and phosphorus reductions in Carmi also translate to phosphorus reductions in Lake Champlain. And we do anticipate, as I mentioned before, that based on the draft budget currently, there's a substantial increase in the funding available for clean water projects in the state fiscal year 23 budget compared to prior years. So we hope that that provides a little bit of reassurance that there will be funds in the system to support that work through the DEC programs. And also, I believe Agency of Agriculture continues to develop and work with farmers on projects in that watershed as well.
Thank you, Emily. The next question is from Jill Arachi from BACD, asking if the budget is split by major watersheds.
Yes, so most of the line items in the budget are available statewide, with the exception of the water quality restoration formula grants, which are specifically targeted to Lake Champlain and Lake Memphremagog. We are going to be working to allocate those dollars across the sub-watersheds of Lake Champlain and Lake Memphremagog and to Lake Memphremagog based on a separate target setting fund allocation exercise we're working through with partners this fall and into early winter. And so we don't have those numbers available, or they're not incorporated in this budget package, but we do have some draft figures of how those will be split across Lake Champlain and Lake Memphremagog available. And I just don't have them handy with me right now, but perhaps if Neil came in is on the line, he'd be able to jump on and share what that split looks like. And then the only other geographic distinction I'll highlight is the 3-acre general permit funding, which and the MS4 permit funding, which is targeting 3 acres occurring in Lake Champlain and Lake Memphremagog and stormwater impaired waters. So those are targeted geographically, as well as the MS4 permit, which is only in select communities in the Lake Champlain Basin at this time. And Neil, I see you are here. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. Nice to see you all. Emily, you did call on me. I just wanted to square up and make sure you want me to speak to the distribution of formula funds within each of the watersheds of Champlain and Memphremagog. Is that correct?
I think Jill is interested in how much of the $7 million will go to Memphremagog versus Lake Champlain.
Oh, okay.
From formula.
The formula, we haven't finalized that yet, but the initial math looks like something around $650,000 to the Lake Memphremagog watershed.
And just to add to that, we are going through a process working with the watershed planning program and the basin planning process to establish those non-regulatory phosphorus reduction targets for each of those basins operating under formula grants. And we've gone through a process as well, drafting a methodology for what the standard cost per unit of phosphorus would be to reduce phosphorus across those basins as well. So we're in the process of aligning those non-regulatory targets with those cost rates, which will inform the work that Neil is highlighting here with regard to allocating the $7 million proportionately across those basins based on the magnitude of non-regulatory phosphorus reductions that are needed. And we will be putting that work out for a type 3 public notice, 30-day public comment, probably starting in mid to late January. So more to come there, and we'll be working through our stakeholder notification process to be sure to get the word out about that opportunity to comment. Thank you, Neil.
Okay, thank you, Neil, and thank you, Emily. So we have, appears to be many guests attending the meeting this morning, and it's the public comment period. So what I would recommend for those who would like to comment is that you use the hand function, if you can find it, on the Teams screen, which is, you'll see the hand symbol up at the, well, next to the 3 dots on the toolbar. If you don't have access to that functionality and can turn on your camera, we can look for you to see if you raise your hand, you should speak so that we can see that you're trying to speak once we go through the order. So if you would like public comment, why don't you please turn on your camera, raise your hand if you can, and Emily, I think you could start calling the roll here.
Excellent. Secretary Young, we also have some folks in the room who would like to comment. Would you like to start with folks in the room and then move to online attendees?
Yes, absolutely. Let's please do that.
Okay, great. Sure, if you'd like to come up a little closer. Thank you for bearing with us or figuring out this in-person piece. Great, go for it. And the camera is up here.
Hi, I'm Andrea Engelhardt from Lake Carmine Campers Association, and I wanted to thank especially Secretary Moore and Secretary Tibbetts for all the work your agency has done over the past several years in the Lake Carmine watershed. We've seen substantial change in practices of the agricultural community, and we appreciate all that that group is doing. I brought pictures, unfortunately, taken in the middle of the lake on September 17th, where the lake was blooming. It was the day after we had our Lake in Crisis Reviewing Plan 3.5-hour meeting. So we appreciate all that you're doing, all the money that's spent, but the lake is still blooming, and the Caledonia Record had an article where in that article, they said the lake is no better. So I feel we need monitoring and measurement of the phosphorus level in the water. I don't know that it has been reduced by any of the actions and hard work agriculture's done, roads, waterways, all of that. As far as I know, the phosphorus level has remained the same, which is the highest in the state. So I also support Bob's comment about innovation. Perhaps we need to accept the fact that the track we're on is not reducing the phosphorus level in the lake. And we need to try something different and turn to innovation or other techniques to perhaps accomplish some change, because it stayed steady as far as I know. I might be wrong. There might be testing that shows the phosphorus levels less, but the picture on September 17th tells me it's not. So thanks again for all the money you've spent on this lake and all the work. People have been wonderful. All of the state people have been great, but the lake's still blooming. I don't have the solution. Your experts might, but I think some different track than what we're on would be good. Thanks so much. Thank you, Emily, for sharing in this chair.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, moving on to our virtual attendees. I see Rob Evans, hand raised next, and then Jared Carpenter, you're up following.
Well, good morning, everybody, and I would just like to highlight again what was just said about Lake Carmine and just how grateful we are for our ag community and our DEC partners and all our clean water stakeholders that are working so hard up in Lake Carmine. There are a ton of projects that are continue to be in place up there. I would agree with what was just said. You know, we still continue to deal with the challenges of blooms that now seem to be going and extending into late fall. I just want to advocate for the continued monitoring of the lake from the platform, from UVM extension to our tributary. I think that's where, you know, the money needs to be spent in finding where, you know, the phosphorus and other things are coming into the lake that are causing the blooms. But just wanted to give a shout out in person to Oliver Pearson, who's just been an outstanding partner from DEC, who literally is available to us 24 hours a day. And just would ask that, you know, we think about not only sustaining where we are for the 50,000, but continue to look for other avenues to increase the financial investments that we're making in Lake Carmine. Again, thanks everybody. I appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you, Rob.
All set? Good morning, everyone. Excuse me. Good morning. Jared Carpenter, Lake Champlain Committee. The members of the Act 76 stakeholders group that have been getting together recently have heard me lament in recent weeks that when we were putting this legislation together up at the State House and working on all the moving parts, I wish we had spent more time on the structure of the distribution of the funds. The advocates, environmental advocates, are going to file fairly specific comments beyond just the survey, sort of on the structure and some of our concerns.
Oh, come on. Whatever you're doing is crashing the internet.
Me?
Yes.
Is that me?
Oh, sorry.
Hey, Mary, we can hear you. So at any rate, I guess right now a very specific concern is that the enhancement grants are being shortchanged. When we put this together, we are fairly specific that from the Clean Water Fund was supposed to be a floor of 20% for the enhancement grants to a maximum of $5 million, which at the current numbers would be about $4.3 million to about $5 million for the enhancement grants, specifically put together so we would make sure that there would be money for projects and programs outside of the Lake Champlain Basin. And currently, well, the level of funding is about $3 million, and that's a little bit shorter than what's in statute coming out of the Clean Water Fund. And there's really concern that there won't be enough money in some of these areas that are outside to do water quality projects outside of just pollution reduction programming. So culvert replacements, all these other projects that really need to be done for water quality. The second concern with that is none of us ever envisioned VHCB's funding being included in the enhancement grants. That's to say a little bit out of left field for all of us, and I won't speak for them, but I think it's all out of left field for VHCB as well. VHCB does wonderful work, and they always have, but they're not really envisioned in what we had done with the enhancement grants. And to take $2 million from the enhancement grants to VHCB's budget out of the capital fund is just not what we sort of envisioned there. So we'll file more formal comments, but we would like to, at some point, maybe not, this isn't necessarily the forum, sort of hear the thought process on why the enhancement grants were structured in that fashion. Thank you so much for the time.
Thank you, Jared. You raised important points, and certainly looking forward to your written comments and taking it under consideration and answering those questions.
Thank you as always.
Next up, we have Abby White. Hi, Abby. Thank you.
Hi, thank you all. So I'm Abby White. I'm Vice President for Strategic Communications at the Vermont Land Trust, and also one of the co-chairs of the Vermont Housing and Conservation Coalition, a coalition of over 100 organizations in housing and conservation that advocate for strong investments in housing and conservation through VHCB. So first, I'd just like to applaud the legislature and the administration for focusing on clean water and adding this as a priority. It's really essential for our environmental and economic vitality. However, I'd like to raise some concerns with this proposal on behalf of the coalition, as it appears that this is pitting one program against the other. Both the Water Quality Enhancement Program and VHCB's land conservation work need to be funded. The resources are available and should be deployed fully. So while the goals of the programs are similar, they differ in important ways in their design and their impact. So first, VHCB investments go to projects that meet multiple goals, such as outdoor recreation, habitat connectivity, climate resilience, and forest block connectivity. Clean water is one of those goals. However, there's many others, and I thought it was important to mention them. ANR's Water Quality Enhancement Program is primarily focused on improving water quality. So again, while they're similar, VHCB's program is multifaceted and serves many purposes. Land conservation and water quality effort is long-standing activity of VHCB. To show the state's full investment in water quality, as you know, the line item was moved from the VHCB section of the capital bill and into the clean water budget portion of the capital bill a number of years ago. The intent of this action was not to change the program, but to use it to take the place, of other important water quality work. So third, while the activity and programs of the VHCB water quality work is consistent with the language of Act 76, we do not believe that the draft budget is consistent with the intent of the act, which is to provide $5 million in funding for new programs of enhancement grants. So it was clear to us that the legislature expects $5 million for a new program. And finally, there's a lot of state and federal money available right now in this area, considering high levels of revenue from the property transfer tax, one-time funding and federal funds. Funding is available for both and should be applied to both programs. So we encourage you to adjust the approach to ensure that we maintain, not diminish, the investments going to both water pollution cleanup work in the A&R program and the broader quality protection strategies driven by VHCB investments. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Abby. So are there any other guests, members of the public who would like to speak, who don't have access to the hand function or the camera function? Now's the time, I think, to speak up, and we will make sure you've got the opportunity to comment. I don't hear or see anyone, Emily, on my end. And how about you?
Same here. Thank you.
Okay, with that, the next action item is to I think, entertain a motion to approve the draft FY23 Clean Water Budget Recommendation and online questionnaires. The online questionnaire we're going to post for public comment. We've already received some public comment, and you know, unless there's a discussion point around that, I think some good points have been raised that are going to require some further research and contemplation, and bringing that back to the board at our next meeting after we've received all the public comment and can do it in one space. So that would be my recommendation, but if people feel differently, just please speak up now, board members. Okay, hearing no feedback on that, I think I'll entertain a motion, and then we can move to the discussion and approval stages of agenda item 7. Is there a motion to approve the draft State Fiscal Year 2023 Clean Water Budget Recommendation and online questionnaires to post for public comment as presented in the materials today?
So moved.
I'll second.
Okay, is there any further discussion, questions around the materials that we have under consideration? All right, seeing none, all in favor of the motion, please say aye.
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 Is there
Aye.
anyone opposed? Are there any abstentions? Okay, thank you. You've approved the draft Clean Water Budget and online questionnaire to be posted for public comment. And thank you, Emily and everybody else on the team. You do such great work, and this year it started to, you know, shift up and get pretty complex. So like I said, I think we'll see, you know, some probably more changes than this year than not, based on what happens out there in the Treasury world, in Congress, and in this public comment period. So looking forward to that. The final line item is the program audit, and we've been talking about the program audit, I think, for a couple of years now. And I wanted to just give an update of where we are on that. And we did put an RFP out late summer, early fall. I believe it was in September, for a 3-week period. We received no questions around the RFP, which is part of the process, and we received no bids. So what we've done is reposted it for another 3-week period. I believe it's 3 weeks, but it was reposted on October 4th. Questions are due by October 18th, and RFP responses are due by November 1st. So we thought we'd give it, one more try. There's anecdotal, I think, feedback during COVID when we first put this out. It was just, we were all in lockdown a year or so ago, and folks were just not bidding on the contracts on this proposal. We've put it out again. I really don't have any insight into why we did not receive any bids on the work. I do know that one of the statutory criteria is that this be completed by an independent organization and a qualified independent environmental consultant or organization with sweeping knowledge of the Clean Water Act, water quality requirements and programs around the Lake Champlain Total Maximum Daily Load Plan and the program elements around the Clean Water Initiative. I think Jim has pointed out to us it's a pretty big project. So we are what we plan to do in the Agency of Administration is see what we get on November 1st, if we receive any bids. And if not, we'll come back to you with some recommendations, and it's time to have the conversation, I think, with the legislature about what they hope to achieve with the audit and how we can maybe work together to narrow its scope or make it a more manageable project and achieve the independent audit that they've required in the statute. The deadline for the audit was extended. I believe it's now due in January of 2023. So if we can get some modification of the audit terms, we may not be able to meet that date, but at least we'll be advancing the audit. So we'll open that up to any questions, comments, recommendations, any ideas you might have. And certainly feel free to share those, throughout the RFP process or after, before the next meeting. So with that, then, if there's no discussion around the audit, I think we can entertain a motion to adjourn and thank everybody for getting up early and attending this meeting and getting the budget process started. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Before we do that, I'd just like to acknowledge, as I'm sure many folks on the line recognize, Suzanne has announced her retirement, which will be, I believe, November 5th. So before we would meet again, absent a quorum of the board coming together for the public hearing on November 4th. And I just wanted to take a moment to acknowledge her incredible public service career spanning more than 40 years, including spending the last 4.5 years as chair of the Clean Water Board, along with chair of the Climate Council, and know that both of these undertakings have been really significant. And I'm sure real learning opportunities, but I've been so grateful for Suzanne's leadership and just her calm, steady hand in guiding both of these processes through, and wanted to take a moment to just honor her service and thank you, Suzanne, for your commitment to all of the work of state government. You'll be missed.
Well, thank you, Julie, and thank all of you. I've learned an incredible amount through this board and the work that the Clean Water Initiative does. It's incredibly important, and I feel like all of us have accomplished bringing some order and some real decision making around the challenge at hand, and I'm so grateful that we've been able to find funding sources that are sustainable and we're able to continue this work, and that's mostly due to you and your team, Julie. So thank you. I appreciate the shout out, and I appreciate all the work that you've done, and we'll let you know who'll be the secretary or secretary's designee before the next meeting, I hope. So thank you all. So with that, I think we need to take a vote on the motion to adjourn and call it a morning.
I'll move to adjourn.
Okay,
Second that.
all in favor?
Aye.
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 Great, thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks, appreciate it.